What's up, everybody? Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. We hope you are all well. Mike, what are we talking about tonight, dude?
We're talking about beavers and their propensity for building dams.
I've always been curious of why they naturally build such wondrous structures.
More importantly, how we get quote-unquote natural flavor from their anal glands.
Ooh. See, I knew about that one.
Yep. That is the topic for tonight's Whatcast. I hope you didn't come here looking for aliens or goblins, because all you're getting is beaver anal glands. All beaver anal glands, all the motherfucking time. That's the new slogan for the Whatcast. Get your t-shirts now at teespring.com/thewhatcast. Anal beaver glands. And also you can see the adult videos on our Patreon page. So go to patreon.com/thewhatcast as well. Go there and watch the beaver gland pudding videos. It's really gross.
Yeah, Mike's made a survival video, so where if you're stranded near beavers, you can just suck that nutrient flavored gland directly.
Yeah, it's definitely not for children or the faint of heart or old people or really anyone. You probably just shouldn't watch it, but you should definitely go join our Patreon, because it's a lot of fun. We do other things other than anal beaver pudding. We do neat things over there, like release shows and give you stickers and high fives and access to Discord, and also ad-free shows if you're sick of the shows, or sick of the ads. Not sick of the shows. You're not sick of the shows. You love the shows. Yes, love the show. Love the show. But I understand if you don't like the ads, but hey, there's a remedy for that, and it's called patreon.com/thewhatcast. Once again, that's patreon.com/thewhatcast. Anal beaver pudding. But today I want to talk about an event that's known as the Warminster Thing. And generally, when you hear something called the something thing, like you think of like a monster or something, it's the thing. But this was called the Thing because it was a series of unexplained events. So it was just like, well, that's the thing that's happening in Warminster. So it just kind of became known as the Warminster Thing.
Yeah, you sent me a video to check out before we recorded. I didn't get to watch too much of it, but with a title like that, I expected some type of, even with what we know in the descriptions of the creatures that we know about now, we've covered some weird shit. And for them to call it a thing, I was like, it's got to be super bizarre. But just watching the first few minutes of that video, it might not be some type of weird fleshy monster, but definitely some weird, very bizarre events.
Yeah, it's a really weird. Well, I don't even want to call it a case, because it's more like a series of cases. But the bulk of it, like what the most famous part, happened in the 60s. But there's a history of UFO sightings in this area that dates back at least 100 years. But for those that don't know, Warminster is a small town in southwest England. To give you guys some idea of where it is, it's about 15 miles away from Stonehenge. So we all know about the weirdness that's been attributed to Stonehenge. A lot of UFO sightings and the weird energies along the ley lines and crop circles in the area, all that stuff. It's a place of power, but it was settled over 1,000 years ago by the Anglo-Saxons, but before that, it was an area that was used by the Romans. And I would imagine before the Romans, it was probably whoever predated the people who are known as Druids, whatever that group of people were before the Romans. They likely ran this area before the Romans, and in mythology / mythical history, however you want to look at it, King Arthur himself was said to reign over this area of England when he was a king, and other British royals actually also reigned over this area before England was united. So it's got a long history that goes back over 1,000 years. Within the past century or so, it had just been a small town leading up to World War II, and even after World War II, the population was under 10,000 people. But once the events that happened in the 60s occurred, the population seemed to double to almost 20,000 people that had moved in. Some of them were temporary residents, some moved in to stay. But it seems like the events that happened in the 60s kind of called people in, like brought in the curious people. But like I said, the sightings, weird sightings and sounds seem to be something that has occurred there for about 100 years now. There were some, primarily it seemed to be weird sounds in the sky that was reported early on. But there were also reports of weird UFO cases in the 30s. Now, if you remember way back when we discussed the UFOs in wartime, England had a number of weird phantom, I believe they were called phantom rockets or ghost rockets, that were seen flying over England in the 30s before World War II, and even at the beginning of World War II, that did not match any known aircraft at all. So it's possible that these could be linked to those sightings, these early ones at least. But the sounds that people were hearing in the sky, they described as a cracking noise, like the sound of branches on trees being cracked is how it was described.
Are they like insanely loud, huge cracks, or is it just like,
yeah, and they're emanating from the sky.
Whoa.
And in some cases where the crafts were seen, they seem to be kind of coming from the craft themselves.
Wow.
And these continued through the 30s and 40s. Even as World War II was going on, these sightings continued. But we know during World War II there were a number of sightings. There was the whole Foo Fighter thing, but it was these things were being seen by both sides. And there were even sightings in Japan that was also seen by both sides.
Really?
Yeah. There was an incident. It was one of the islands off of Japan, and there was an army unit flying in, going to one of the military bases there. And as they were coming in, there was a red rocket that just shot past them. It had no wings, and it was just like this red cylindrical shape with like a cone front, like a rocket, that just flew past them on their way to Japan.
Whoa.
It wasn't a missile, wasn't a plane. They don't know what the fuck it was.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, like we established last episode, for some reason these things seem to be attracted to our wars, and I don't know why. But these continued even after the war stopped in this area. The later half of the 1950s, the sightings began to escalate, and by the mid-60s, this had taken on, not only was it well known in the area, but also well known throughout England, and also it had been reported all over the world. But I'll get to that in a minute, because there were, I want to talk about I want to talk about another sighting that happened in the early 60s before everything kind of blew up. But one of the first well-described events that kind of kicked off this ciries of events, but it was 1961, and there was a report by 4 witnesses who saw a cigar-shaped object fly across the sky that left a trail of sparks as it was flying across the sky. And from that point on, there would be almost constant reports of this thing being seen over the years, this particular cigar-shaped craft flying over the area. But things really started to really pick up or get noticed, I should say, on a national scale in 1965, but it was as a result of events that happened on Christmas Day in 1964 that led this whole case. Now, the events that took place were reported by several witnesses, but they didn't get reported in the newspapers until early 1965. And I mean, you can attribute it to the holiday, most likely, with it being Christmas and then New Year's and all that. But what had happened was, on Christmas Day, there were a number of witnesses who heard this strange noise, but the noise was reported as being different by different witnesses in different areas of Warminster, which is kind of weird. Some people reported a loud booming noise. Others said they heard the crackling noise, and they described a noise that sounded like tree branches being dragged over gravel, but it seemed to be coming from the sky, which is a lot different, because I mean we've talked about the booms before,
mm-hmm.
and the sky horns or whatever,
trumpets.
Yeah. But we've never heard anything like that, like a crackling noise.
Yeah, that's a very odd description. Bushes being drug over gravel. I mean, I applaud the person who said that. It's very descriptive and a great description. But to hear that sound, that's very odd and coming from the sky.
Yeah. And then they said there were some witnesses that said that they heard things being dragged across their roofs. And they said it sounded like branches being scraped across the top of their roofs. Other people said that they heard pounding on top of their houses, like something was on their roof pounding on them.
Ugh.
And one witness named Mildred Head was quoted as saying, "Our ceiling came alive with strange sounds that lashed our roof as if twigs were brushing the tiles, and it ended up with a noise like giant hailstones." And then that same day, there was a woman named, again, this is Christmas morning, a woman named Marjorie By was walking to church, and she said she heard this loud booming noise that was so intense that she felt paralyzed and completely helpless.
Ooh, that's scary.
And all in all, within the area, there were 30 people who claimed to hear these noises. But they never figured out what made the noises. Nobody saw anything. There was just all of a sudden these loud noises, and that was kind of it for that particular event.
It just ceased?
No, for that day. So it started with the sounds, but it wasn't until the first half of January when it was actually written about. And it was this man named Arthur Shuttlewood who worked as an editor for the local newspaper called the Warminster Journal. And he had been working there, he had been working as a newspaper journalist for over 20 years. And he first wrote about it as he wrote about it as a skeptic. and it was kind of, it wasn't taken seriously. It ended up being put in the back of the newspaper kind of as filler. And after he reported it, he started getting responses to his article where, and this is where the number of 30 witnesses come from, because I'm sure there were more than that, but there were 30 people that actually reached out to him to share their experiences on that Christmas morning.
That's a lot of people to have reach out.
Yeah. And he started compiling these cases and putting together his own sort of like UFO research file about this.
Yeah.
And he started as a complete skeptic, but I'm going to get to it later, but he became a full-on believer as things went on. In the weeks and the months that followed his newspaper report, other letters and reports were pouring in from people all around the region. And he started getting people reporting not only their experiences with the noise on that Christmas day, but also continued sightings. There were weird things seen in the sky. I hesitate to say like flying saucers or whatever, but some of these descriptions described metal orbs that were seen flying in the sky. And then that cigar-shaped craft ended up coming back as well and was being reported throughout the 60s. The sounds also continued, but they changed from booms and crackles. Well, I'm sorry, that booms and crackles continued, but also adding to that were these weird droning and what was described as a whizzing sound. So I would imagine like the sound of like you hear in the movies when a bullet whizzes past, like whew, like something like that, but then like a droning, like a hum sound. And that's actually something I've wanted to cover on the show. I haven't heard really much about it recently. But I remember back when we first started doing the show, there were a few places across the United States that were reporting these mystery booms and mystery hums. And I think we did a show about one of the locations before, but they were reported all across the country.
Yeah, they're reported all across the world. The one that we did cover was, I believe, one in Scotland, and they have a film crew out there, and you can just hear this insane loud hum. I mean, it's just something that happens.
Yeah, it's really weird. And the booms were even weirder because the booms were things that people were reporting regularly in some places for a while, and they seemed to either be coming from the sky or underground, but people were feeling it, they were hearing it, and there was no explanation for it. It's so fucking bizarre.
It really is.
During these sightings, there was all sorts of weird shit that was being described by people. In June, there was a cigar-shaped craft that came back. It was a glowing cigar-shaped craft that was witnessed by 17 people in one night. In August, there was a woman who saw a bright light that looked like a super bright star that was traveling across the sky, but she said that it was in the middle of the night, and she was actually pulled out of a deep sleep by this deafening droning noise. And when she looked outside to see what it was, she saw this bright light flying across the sky.
Wow. Okay. So this is the 60s. So nobody's unfamiliar with a propeller plane flying by.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
And so just to provide some context, before I get too far into what happened in the 60s, when we go back to the original sightings and sounds from the 30s and 40s, they were seeing this cigar-shaped craft, and they described booming sounds and crackling sounds. Now, it could be possible, I suppose, that these were early accounts of aircraft breaking the sound barrier. Now, up until 1947, planes were only able to break the sound barrier during a dive.
Right.
They flying straight, they were not able to. But then in 1947, Chuck Yeager was finally able to break the sound barrier while flying vertically.
Where he promptly exploded.
No, he survived and has been the man. But even with that though, there's some question as to whether or not he was really the first one. There was this guy, and this really sucks for the dude too, because Chuck Yeager gets all the credit, but this guy named George Welch, he makes the claim to have broken the sound barrier on October 1st while he was flying an XP-86 Sabre, but they didn't have the correct instruments to read it. So he did it again on October 14th, 1947, 30 minutes before Chuck Yeager officially broke the sound barrier in his Bell X-10 or X1. There were witnesses on hand and instruments that seemed to imply that George Welch broke the sound barrier, but neither one of his flights were properly monitored, so his claims aren't officially recognized. And it wasn't until April of the next year that a supersonic flight in that particular craft would be recorded. So
Aww.
George Welch doesn't get the official nod. It's Chuck Yeager that gets the official nod. But that was in 47. So I just say that to give you some context regarding the sound barrier for anyone who's like, well, maybe it was some early craft breaking the sound barrier, and maybe it was. We don't. Maybe the Foo Fighters in World War II were experimental craft that neither side really knew about. But it's hard to say. And by the 60s, craft was obviously available to break the sound barrier, and while it could be possible that there were experimental aircraft flying overhead of Warminster during that time, it doesn't really explain everything. So we got all sorts of weird... Was that your phone?
Yeah, dude. Sorry, this is that call.
Oh, that call?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. I was about to yell at you for interrupting the show again, but shit. All right, I'm here for you, man. Just put it on speaker. Let's see what's going on.
Hello?
Hi, this is Mateo.
This is him?
Hi, my name is Amy. I'm calling from Dr. Garcia's office.
Okay. Hey, Amy, what's up?
Hi, I have your test results right here.
All right. Give it to me straight, Amy.
You've tested positive for ads.
Oh, no! Well, man, look on the bright side. At least you don't have to clap.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, enough of that. Moving right along. There was an event it was on August 17th in 1965, where there was this huge boom that echoed all across the area. And it was described as sounding like a bomb going off, which, at this point, it's 20 years after World War II, so you're going to have people that remember what it sounded like when bombs were going off. And here we are, 1965, there's this huge boom that just echoes around the area. And all of a sudden there's this orange flame flying in the sky that's crackling and hissing.
Whoa.
And while it's crackling and hissing, there's all these booming sounds that are going off around the area. And while this was going on, there were claims made that flocks of birds dropped dead out of the sky and just crashed to the ground. There were even some people who had claimed that they had been physically thrown to the ground by the sound of these blasts.
Wow.
And while this was going on, there were cars that stopped operating as this flame flew over. And some people even claimed to have damage done to buildings from the sounds.
That's insane. That's just concussion from sounds?
Right.
Wow. Okay, so that's got to either be a super huge explosion or a moderate explosion. That's pretty close.
Yeah. But what would explain the flame?
Right. The crackling flame.
Yeah. because it was described as flying in the air, like not an explosion, like an explosion that occurred in the air. This was something that, was seen flying in the air.
That's strange.
And after this event, this freaked people out enough to call a town meeting together. So on August 27th, 1965, the local residents called together a town meeting to discuss what was going on. Town officials were going to be there. It actually got so much attention that it was filmed for news to be broadcast across the country.
Wow.
And what it ended up being was the town officials had no explanation for it. So what this whole event ended up being was just local residents voicing their fear and concern regarding these events and sharing their experiences.
Holy shit. So we get to see on video these people express themselves and check how genuine they're being and expressing fears. Wow, that has to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I haven't found the video, so I don't know if it exists anywhere online, but I know it was supposed to have been broadcast throughout England.
It might be in that video you sent me, dude, because it started off like an older documentary.
Oh yeah, I didn't even watch the video. I saw that there was a video about it, so I just sent it to you in case you wanted to get a quick overview.
I'll finish watching it, and either way I'll put it in the show notes so you guys can watch it. And I also may have a source for, believe it or not, for old British television shows, like old ones. Yeah,
nice. So through this town hall meeting, Arthur Shuttlewood was there again, and he was gathering more reports. And within the next year, he would have around 1,000 reports of different activity that occurred in the skies of Warminster, whether it be sightings or sounds. It didn't seem to really matter. But there were, he was getting all these different reports of different things that occurred throughout the past year. At this meeting also, there was a man named David Halton who described witnessing a group of pigeons suddenly dropping out of the sky and dying. And this may possibly be the source for the story of the birds coming out of the sky during the crash, but it's reported separately. So I don't know if there was another witness who saw this as well. But David Halton said that he was aware of flocks of pigeons dying, but he also claimed that there were an unusually large number of rats that were showing up with these puncture wounds.
What?
In their skin, and they were drained of blood and in some cases mutilated, like cow mutilation, but with rats in the area.
Holy crap.
And there was no explanation as to why rats were turning up this way. But this whole thing takes an even weirder turn, almost an Indrid Cold sort of turn.
Ooh.
So this meeting occurred on August 27th, and on September 25th, Mr. Shuttlewood claimed that he received this call from a person who referred to himself as Carney, but he spells it Karne. And this person or being claimed to be an extraterrestrial from the planet Astasa. And so because this is a phone call and Arthur Shuttlewood is a skeptic at this point, he tells the individual to prove it. And as soon as he tells him on the phone that he's going to need to prove it, there's a knock on his door. And he opens the door, and there's a person there who said his name was Carney. But this person had blotchy skin and eyes without pupils.
Mm-hmm. Whoa.
And So Carney comes into his house and sits down and starts talking to him about this impending catastrophic war. And he warned that humankind was on the fast track to doom. And, you know, the usual alien prophecies: you need to learn to love each other, rub your butt crystals, hug, and stop killing each other, or you're all going to die. Basically, that sort of thing. But the conversation just came to an abrupt end. All of a sudden, Carney just gets up. He says he's having a tough time breathing, and he starts fidgeting. Looks down at this gold device that's on his wrist. Not a watch. He describes it as a gold device. Looks down at the device, excuses himself, and then he's never seen again.
Wow, very Indrid Cold indeed.
Yeah. Or Men in Black type thing. But during the next year, Arthur Shuttlewood had this report that he met with this Carney person on September 25th, 1965. But from this time and over the next year, other beings started showing up. And most commonly were these faceless humanoids, where it's these things that looked vaguely humanoid, but they had no face. And then there were tall humanoids that showed up that were dressed completely in white. These strangers started coming into the area wearing balaclavas, and others that came in wearing helmets that covered their faces.
What the fuck?
And then there was one witness who said he saw a figure clad in all gray who had light-colored streaming hair. So to me, it sounds like some of these are the tall whites.
Absolutely.
And then the people wearing balaclavas or helmets, they could potentially be either agents looking in on these beings, or maybe Men in Black.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about the faceless humanoids, though. Could that possibly be like a type of mask?
I think that's just a different species of aliens. It sounds like there's a couple of them down there. By the amount of craft there should be, right? If they're landing.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't recall hearing about faceless humanoids before in relation to UFO sightings. That doesn't ring bells with me.
Right. I wonder, after we record, I'm going to Google faceless humanoid sightings and see if something comes up other than video game shit.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, that's so weird. But the sightings went on throughout the 60s. Arthur, he ended up writing 2 books about the events, what people witnessed, as well as his own experiences. And he stuck to his story up until his death in 1996. He claimed that this was real and never backed down from his story.
Wow.
But the sightings and the sounds continued on throughout the 60s, and then in the 70s, crop circles started showing up. And the crop circles themselves, like I said, this place is 15 miles from Stonehenge, and we know that there have been plenty of crop circles that have shown up around Stonehenge. So is this potentially all related because it's within the area of Stonehenge?
Well, don't we know that most of those were faked, especially around that area now?
No, not necessarily. There's a few people that have claimed to have done them, but when pressed to reproduce like some of the grander scale ones, they haven't been able to do anything remotely close.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Especially under the cover of night. Like when they're asked to do it and reproduce what they do it during the day where, conditions are ideal. And even then they couldn't reproduce what was done. They can make some pretty believable looking ones, but they're usually smaller in scale and not as detailed.
That's funny. I can see you setting up some type of test like that and having them all get ready and go like, okay, now wait till about 2 a.m. You got to do this in the dead of night, you guys. Yeah,
right in the middle of the night, and you've got to be gone before the sun rises. Good luck. The weird thing is that all this stuff happens in the same area, and it's concentrated on around the area of Warminster, obviously, but it seems to be concentrated on Cradle Hill, Star Hill, and Clay Hill. And I can't remember which one of the hills, but there's one that you can see Stonehenge from. And I remember hearing this story from a while back. I can't remember what book it's from, but there was a witness who wrote this book about various weird things that he's encountered. And he talks about this event that happened on this hill, but he related it to fairies or the fae, where he was on the hill and like this fog rolled in, and then they started seeing these little figures at the base of the hill. But he attributed the figures to fairies, rather than aliens. But we've talked so many times on the show how the two are so fucking similar,
right,
that it's likely the same thing. Even though all this stuff happened, like the bulk of this happened in the 60s, then the crop circles came in the 70s. But there's still sightings reported to this day. And there was one reported just last year.
No kidding.
Yeah. There was a video that was recorded in June of 2017 that shows this weird light in the sky that's circling repeatedly around Clay Hill. There is, I do want to note that in addition to being in close proximity to Stonehenge, there's also a military base known as Battlesbury Barracks that is nearby. And a lot of people point to this military base as being the most likely culprit for all of these events. But the barracks are an Army infantry base. It's not like a experimental air base where they're running, testing weird experimental craft. It's a Army infantry base. So ground units, sure, you're going to have planes coming in and out from time to time, but you're not going to be having test flights occurring here.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't like Area 51 or something. But I just wanted to point that out because, again, we've got the tie-in with UFOs and military or war or whatever. And but here you've got this weird crossover where you've got like this mystical ancient monument, and then you've got this modern base housing weapons and soldiers. So it's like a double whammy for UFO attention. Like, oh, let's go check out this mystical place, and then while we're here, see what the fucking soldiers are up to. It's like an alien road trip. You gotta hit all the attractions on the way.
Right.
But there's never been any explanation offered at all as to what could have occurred during this period of time. It was like just this weird thing that happened, and occasional UFO sightings still occur, but there's no explanation for what any of this could be or what caused it.
That's incredible, especially something that was witnessed by so many people. I mean, not to the gravity, but it harkens back to the Phoenix Lights. So many witnesses, over 1,000 reports that guy had.
It's, to me, the most unnerving thing is the people that heard things on their roof. Like people reported hearing booms from the sky, but then you had people hearing things being dragged across their roof or pounding on their roof. Like, what the hell was that? Was it Santa? How funny would it be? The entire UFO incident, it's Santa was real, and he realized that he freaked people out so much. He's like, you know what? This is the last year I'm doing this shit.
I wouldn't blame him.
Yeah. It's like I'm giving old ladies heart attacks. She's just trying to go to church. She's frozen her place. Trying to bring joy, not fear. You know what? Maybe my days as Saint Nick are over. Ho, ho, ho. I have a machine gun now. I don't know, man. It's such a weird case. And I do love the fact that it really started on a holiday. On Christmas of all days. And that was the inciting incident, and then this whole thing took off from there. Even though there had been sightings beforehand and continue to this day, like the major flap started on Christmas. It's awesome.
I wonder if the area and the surrounding area has any history with cryptids. I wonder if there's ever been sightings of anything that could be alien-like. Maybe not so much of a faceless humanoid, but something super bizarre, like the Enfield horror or something like that.
To me, it like hearing how similar the Carney thing is with Indrid Cold, and then hearing about the pounding and scraping sounds on the roof, and thinking back to the Chicago Mothman and how people were reporting hearing it on their roofs. And then you look at the original Mothman sighting in Point Pleasant, which ended with Indrid Cold. Or, well, I shouldn't say ended with Indrid Cold, came as the UFO sightings were dying down. So I wonder if it's like a similar sort of situation.
Yeah.
And what was the year? Was it 67?
66 to 67.
66. So the Mothman thing happened a year after this stuff really picked up. And Carney was said to be around in 65, or September of 65, when he started messing with Arthur Shuttlewood. And then he just got on his little galactic cruiser and went over to Point Pleasant the next year and was like, "Hey guys, I come bringing Mothman. Merry Christmas. Oh, and by the way, it's not going to be Merry Christmas because a bunch of you motherfuckers are going to die."
It's strange. The similarities are very weird. I wonder, if there was more investigation into this case as there was into the Mothman case. Even during and after, how much more weird stuff would have come out of it.
Yeah, I kind of want to get Arthur Shuttlewood's books and read through them. Apparently they're pretty pulpy. Like a lot of people speculate that he's embellishing the events and kind of turning it into a story, like more like a story based on true events sort of situation than a actual true story. But he claims it's all real, or claimed, I should say, since he's been dead since 96. But it's one of those things. I don't know, but there were enough people that witnessed weird things that I can confidently say that something was going on. Unfortunately, he was the only one that ever claimed to have contact with one of these beings. Even though others were reported as being spotted, he's the only one that had any sort of interaction. But apparently it only lasted that one time, and the aliens basically like stop being dicks and understand there's more to life than war. And then he's like, "Oh, would you look at the time? Peace." And then he's out.
It's so similar to Point Pleasant stuff, dude. For him to make up something that ended up happening that's so similar, almost more bizarre than him lying about it.
Yeah. It is.
Wow, what a crazy story. I can't believe that.
Yeah. So maybe we'll get a part 2 based on Arthur Shuttlewood's books if I can track them down and if they're worth devoting another episode to. But that's the basic story of the Warminster thing. People got knocked around, big booms, Indrid Cold, crop circles, rats eaten by vampires.
The booms from the sky. I remember probably right when we started doing the show, there was those trumpets from the sky shit that happened that were obviously fake.
Yeah. It was the soundbite from the War of the Worlds movie.
Right. Did I ever tell you about my unexplained huge sound experience?
I don't believe so.
Really?
Do tell.
Yeah, I can't believe I've never told you this. And something I experienced I still can't explain to this day. And when I woke up the next day and told people about it, like that were there, they didn't notice it. And they were like, you have to be insane. But I was asleep, and it had to be maybe 2 a.m. I was dead asleep. I passed out, and I heard a noise that was, just probably the second loudest noise I've ever heard. I actually, as a young teenager, had a car drive into the downstairs apartment right below mine in the middle of the night when I was asleep, which was very fucking loud. And this...
Yeah, probably scared the fucking shit out of you.
Yeah, especially... Funny side note, the guy was getting shot at, so there was... It kept...
Oh my God.
It kept being loud.
Complete chaos.
Yeah. So, I experienced an ungodly loud sound while I was sleeping before, and this was louder. It was just such a loud sound, and as I woke up, I sat up and got up. And as I was staying there, I can hear like the reverberance of the sound happening. And the only thing I can liken it to is somebody grabbing like one of those huge steel dumpsters, like the back of grocery stores and restaurants, and dropping it off like a 50-story building. The next day I went outside to check to see if any cars were smashed, if there was any like debris on the ground from any damage from anything, because it was just huge. It was huge. We've all seen footage of explosions and bombs going off, and it was comparable to that. It was huge. I expected there to be damage outside the next morning.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
There was one time after 9/11, it was probably a month after 9/11. I was sitting at home and I was on my computer, and all of a sudden I heard this huge boom, like nothing I had ever heard before in my life, and it shook the entire house. And I had a friend who lived probably, I don't know, I would guess somewhere between 8 and 10 miles away from me. He lived a few cities over. And I was talking to him online, and all of a sudden he goes, "Hold on, I'll be right back. I think the cat's knocked something over upstairs. I just heard a big boom." And I'm like, "What the fuck?" Huh. So then he gets back and I'm like, "Dude, I just heard that big boom here. It sounded like a bomb went off." And no idea what, I assumed at the time that it was a jet breaking the sound barrier, but I'm pretty sure it's illegal for them to do that over residential areas.
Right.
So I don't know what the fuck it was. Cause I also didn't hear, usually you'll hear, I've had at the same house, this was when I was younger, I was living with my parents. While I was there, we had the Blue Angels fly over. So I know how loud fighter jets are when they're flying. And I didn't hear the sound of any approaching jet. I mean, even passenger planes, during certain time, I guess it depends on their altitude or whatever, but you can hear planes inside from time to time, even passenger planes or helicopters, things like that. And I heard nothing approach. It was just this huge sudden boom that I not only heard, but felt. And my friend from 8 to 10 miles away heard the same exact fucking boom.
And nothing in the news or paper?
Nothing in the news, nothing explaining what it could be. I heard nothing else about it. I don't know, if it was ever reported anywhere. I have no idea. Just one of those weird fucking things. Mm-hmm. But I mean, even to this day, I'm in my mind, I'm assuming it was a sonic boom, but I have no fucking clue.
If you guys have heard anything like that or experienced anything like that, let us know. I'd like to hear about that. That'd be weird.
Yeah.
All right, we're out of here.
Thank you for listening to the Whatcast. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, iTunes, and YouTube. Enjoy the podcast. Get yourself a Whatcast t-shirt or a sticker pack. Who was that dude on that one episode? Try the links in Homie's page. All this and more can be found at www.thewhatcasters.com. Thanks again for listening and have a great week.